Welcome to Deeper with Darshana, where we skip the small talk and dive down into what's raw and real. Pleasure, shame, justice, power, healing, liberation. These essential aspects of our human experience are among my favorite topics to explore, and I'm inviting you to join me. I'm your host, Darshana Avila, somatic sex and trauma expert and creator of the Erotic Wholeness Method. It is my belief that we are erotic by nature, and our erotic nature encompasses so much more than you might realize. Come along as I drop into curious conversations with other passionate pros and sensual seekers, and occasionally share musings of my own. Bring your curiosity, your sacred, messy, beautiful humanity, and all the parts of yourself. And let's go deeper together. Hey friends, welcome back to Deeper with Darshana. So have you ever been living through something so freaking awful? And really, it's just like, could this get any worse? Where is my life going to go from here? And then you have the beautiful experience of somewhere down the line looking back and saying, oh, thank you that I had to live through that. That was Claudia's experience when infidelity blew up her marriage and really had her reevaluating life on every level. And it has led her on a gorgeous journey of spiritual expansion, healing, and finding a way to be of service on the other side of that. We had a really honest, candid, warm conversation that I know you're going to get so much out of. So here comes Claudia. Enjoy. Welcome back to Deeper with Darshana. I am so thrilled today to introduce you to Claudia Nanino, a master breathwork facilitator, crystal curator, and an explorer of non-ordinary states of consciousness. Claudia is a Colorado native born to immigrant parents, and she sought out non-traditional modalities after Western approaches to healing came up short and left her really disconnected from her heart. Conscious breathwork brought her own healing to the next level, and now she is fully devoted to supporting others on their path through breath and psychedelic integration. Welcome, Claudia. So happy to be in conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So it feels like on point that we take a breath.
Yes.
And those of you listening, please take a breath with us.
Mm-hmm. Oh. It's so amazing what one breath can do.
Right? I know. And I was it you who told me this? I swear I heard something about 6 breaths is like the real true reset. And I've really been practicing that. So this was a prior conversation between us, and we're just going to dump right in with giving people suggestions straight off the gate here.
Yeah, there was a research study in Japan, and they showed that with as few as 6 breaths, they could already measure improvement to blood pressure, improvement to the alkalinity of your blood, which is tied to your stress levels, your stress hormones, heart rate variability. Like, so many things are happening with 6 breaths. And depending on the pace that you take those breaths, that's oftentimes not even a minute of breath.
Okay, y'all.
You can have measurable. Exactly. We can all find that.
Yeah, I am really a big fan of the quality over quantity approach to how we take care of ourselves. And, that's something that many of us on our healing paths, I think we at a certain point have to figure out is, am I going to do all the bells and whistles and these very elaborate practices all the time? Or am I going to find what's actually simple and sustainable for myself? So that's been my experience. But let's talk about yours, because you have been on quite a healing path for yourself that led you to the work that you do. And I know that there was a big, as for many of us as well, like a big upheaval in your life that brought you here, related to a divorce that was really devastating and just a lot that was happening in your life. Give us a little background, please, on how you came to be this fantastic breath worker.
Thank you. Yes, it's been 9.5 years since this journey began. And I think, honestly, it's been going on for a lot longer than that, but I just wasn't aware. And I was stuck in some pretty bad habits. I was stuck in some stories. I was really buried with resentment and blaming outwardly, especially my ex-husband at the time, and didn't have any really awareness of the part that I was contributing to the relationship or the troubles within the relationship. And I look back on that relationship with so much gratitude. There was so much love there, and we had a long history, and we wanted the best. But we didn't have the tools and we didn't have the knowledge. And I was in a lot of pain, and I had a lot of needs that weren't being met. And I didn't know that really at the time. I just was trying to figure out like what was missing, what was lacking. Why am I so unhappy? Why do I feel unloved? Why do I feel undesired? Why do I feel unseen? Really wanting him to fill all of this for me, not really even considering what I should be responsible for. And then I started to make some pretty poor choices in terms of getting those needs met. And that led to first having an emotional affair that went on for a while, and felt okay because we weren't crossing lines. We were able to justify it like, oh, this is not, this secret intimacy is okay. We're not crossing any physical boundaries. And then found myself, I'm like, wow, now I'm in kind of two relationships where I'm feeling unwanted and unseen and undesired because neither one are fulfilling physical needs. And in my head at the time, like I had tied so much to physical touch and intimacy and desire, like so much of my self-worth was tied up in that. And so then I started to have actual extramarital affairs, and then that spun pretty quickly out of control. And inevitably is what ended the relationship, but also what served as the catalyst for deep self-reflection, finally starting to be accountable, finally starting to look at my piece in things, and mostly with the motivation of like, I never want to be in this place again. Like I've just blown up my life with my choices, my actions, and I feel awful. And how am I ever going to come out of this? How am I ever going to forgive myself? How is anybody going to forgive me? How am I ever going to be worthy and redeem myself? And so I started to look finally and face like the wounds, the patterns, the triggers. Why did I need so much external validation? What was missing, within me? What did I need to finally figure out for myself and heal myself? And that's what started the journey.
Thank you, because I relate to so much in your story, actually. And I think about my marriage, which ended 15 years ago, and circumstances may have been different to an extent, but I really hear you. I went through it, and I know others where it's like in our younger relationships, and young can be a relative term, whether we're speaking about age or we're speaking about our spiritual maturity, our emotional maturity. It all looked good on the outside, but it felt miserable. And I was so unhappy, and I wanted my ex to make me happy. And I too had to go on a very long and winding journey to figure out that it's never going to come from outside of me. So I have that common, and I just really respect your ability to take ownership at this point. I think infidelity is something that we still have such vast misunderstandings around culturally. And that you framed it as a way that you were trying to get needs met. That's generally, in my experience, what it's about, right? Like we're just trying to figure out a way to make these sad parts of ourselves happy, to make these empty parts of ourselves feel full. And this might be like a little hokey, like, but how interesting that filling up with good breath is a big part of how you found your way. So talk a little more about like what that was like when, here you are on the other side of that marriage ending and reckoning with yourself. What else was going on? How did you find your way to breath?
Yeah. So that, like I said, it really spurred this journey of healing, of self-reflection, of self-awareness. There was a lot of it that had started to become compulsive and addictive. I worked with an incredible therapist who helped me kind of piece together how this all came to be. And she suggested I start going to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous meetings. And at first it didn't feel like it would resonate, but I went because I was just trying to, again, do everything I could to redeem myself, and ended up getting a lot of value out of those meetings and understanding like the addictive pieces of it. And yeah, it was interesting to be, I think in our society, we assume like the men are the ones who cheat, right? And we assume that the men are the ones who deal with sex and love addiction or sex addiction or whatever it might be. And there's a lot of shame.
I'll put my professional stamp on saying not true.
Not true at all. But there's these assumptions. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I know that many women have made that choice for themselves. Again,
absolutely.
Needs met in not the most skillful of ways.
So a big part of my journey was trying to heal that shame, the deep shame that I felt for the choices, for this new label that I was carrying, for the judgments that I was making towards myself and receiving from others. And I started to, besides the therapy and 12-step, which were helpful, started to veer into less traditional modalities. And anytime somebody recommended a book, a teacher, a class, any type of modality, I was like, yes, 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 yes. And I was just signing up for everything. And I saw a beautiful TED Talk that the man who ended up becoming my teacher did just on breath in general, not specifically breath work, but breath and spirit and this word and how it crosses cultures. And I was like, wow, this man's energy is absolutely stunning. Like, I'm so curious about him. And I saw that he was offering a breathwork group in Colorado where I had recently moved to. And I was like, oh, sign me up. Sounds like maybe some beautiful self-care, maybe some meditation. I'm not quite sure, but I'm into it. And it ended up being much more than that. Everybody's experience is different with breathwork, but my first one was profound, it was cathartic. It was super surprising. It was in a group of about 70 people, but I had no awareness of anybody else in the room because I was having such a big internal experience, including a lot of emotion coming through. And afterwards, finally feeling a little bit of that shame lift, a little bit of the guilt move. And I was like, what? Like, this is the first thing that's actually felt those feelings, actually helped to move things, and nothing else had done that so far. So I was like, I need to do more of this. I need to dive into this. I want to understand this. And that's what really finally got me to a place of self-forgiveness. And then also just really excited about the modality and wanting to share it with as many people as possible.
Absolutely. And you're making me recall my very first transformational breathwork experience, which was at a yoga studio in Miami, probably, let's say 13 years ago or so, something to that effect. And I really relate to being in a room full of people and everybody else just disappearing when you are so deeply drawn into this powerful experience. And the phrase I've often used to describe mine was, I felt like I was nailed to the cross. Not as religious iconography, but as a physical experience. Like my hands were splayed out at my side and my body was just pressed into the ground. And whatever that energy that the breath really allowed to unleash in me was more powerful than my will. And I think that that's what is so transformational, right? So much of our spiritual seeking, so much of our healing is ultimately about finding whatever it is that we identify with that's bigger than ourselves, greater than ourselves. So yeah, anything that you would add about that? I mean, now you've had so much experience personally in facilitating others. How do you see that show up?
People come to breathwork for all different reasons. Like the story that I shared was what it did for me, but people, sometimes they're just curious. Sometimes they want it to help with stress or anxiety, that it's a really beautiful tool for. Sometimes they've heard that it's wonderful preparation for an experience with psychedelics. Some people come because they've heard it's beautiful integration for a psychedelic journey. For some people, psychedelics aren't an option, but they understand that breathwork is a way that you're able to access this altered state of consciousness, which, as you were saying, can be so beautiful for the spiritual healing, for kind of getting us out of our own way, for helping us to start to explore what's there underneath, kind of let the ego take a little rest while we start to become more of the observer of what's happening with our thoughts, with our body, with our emotions. Breathwork can be pretty powerful for bringing things up that you might have forgotten about or that you don't even realize that you're carrying around with yourself. So it's just fascinating. Now that I've been facilitating for over 8 years and have led thousands of people through breathwork journeys, I continue to be wowed by the stories, by the revelations, by the experiences that people have and what arises for them. And sometimes it is a beautiful, subtle, juicy, nourishing trance, which is so good for the nervous system. So many of us walk through life activated, stress, contracted, and that can be really powerful to just sit there and breathe, and the body just goes to a state of complete peace.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes it's the opposite, and it's big, and it's visceral, and it's explosive, and that's also beautiful. They're both really valuable experiences.
I appreciate you saying that because I know I see this in certain circles that I move in, a lot of chasing peak experiences, a lot of this energy of striving and grasping for something to always have to be big and profound and have a huge impact. But so much of where I've come to 25 years into my spiritual journey is the deepest joy and wisdom and value for me often is coming in the small and the subtle nowadays anyway. And maybe it's a progression, right? We're all in different places at different times, but I love you mentioning that it's just as valuable to have an experience of peace within yourself as something that is more cathartic in nature.
I often get the feedback from people who are like, my brain never shuts off. It's never quiet. It's never still. And I just had 50 minutes of absolute presence and stillness. I have never experienced that in my life. And I'm like,
it's a dream.
Wow, amazing. Like, well, that some people might judge that as like a more chill experience. For that person, it was something they've never touched before.
Right. And I mean that too, you know, like it fits with our cultural norms of striving, doing, accumulating more, bigger, bigger, bigger. And I see a turning of the tide recently where there is an appreciation for more subtlety and simplicity in so many ways. I think we're just saturated, we in the collective sense, with the constant busyness, the constant nervous system activation. And so those places where we can find respite and really replenish ourselves become the most valuable ones of all. And the breath certainly is a way to that. You made a mention of the relationship that for some people that they exist between breath work and psychedelics. And that's obviously a very trendy topic nowadays. And I'm curious how you see those two things as similar, as complementary, as distinct from each other, like a little bit more about that, given that there's overlap of those two in your work.
Yes, I feel that these are both beautiful ways of accessing an altered state of consciousness, a non-ordinary state of consciousness. Yes, psychedelics are trending right now. You know, there's a lot of news about them, and they're a very valuable tool, but they're not for everybody. You know, not everyone can access it, or not everyone has the desire to work with a tool like that. While breath work is way more accessible. Like, yeah, there are some contraindications, but usually most of those can be handled with a modification of the practice, you know, depending on what that might be. But it's breath. It's you and your breath. We're all breathing all the time. Yes, this is a certain technique. And of these deeper...
Forgive the interruption, but we've been saying breath work.
Yeah.
Some people listening may not actually know what we refer to here. So what is this technique?
Yeah. So I use the word breath work specifically talking about the modality that I'm most known for, which is conscious breath work. However, breath work can mean anytime you are being intentional with your breath and perhaps breathing through the nose or the mouth, or using counts, or thinking about breathing into different parts of the body. There are elements of yoga, the pranayama, it's thousands of years old, elements of Tai Chi, elements of Qigong. You know, a lot of people have heard of Wim Hof. He's bringing a lot of attention and awareness around the benefits of breath. And I find that he's a bit more focused on the physical benefits and kind of like a human optimization using breath, which is amazing and a very wonderful outcome and benefit. And then conscious breath work tends to be more of a spiritual, emotional healing practice. And it is a technique that's not difficult, but just different than you typically would breathe. It's approximately 45 to 55 minutes. For most people, they feel like it goes by very quickly. And there's this beauty in breathing in this very specific rhythmic technique that allows you to start to just kind of shift in perspective, perhaps be able to observe your thoughts in a way you don't typically do, start to examine your relationship to your memories, to your past, to your experiences. That can be very helpful. I find it to be incredibly supportive of people who are working with therapists or coaches or any, they're starting to do a lot of self-study and understanding themselves and their patterns, but sometimes that can keep you stuck in your head and trying to think your way through it. And so this is a beautiful way of starting to bring that learning and that information into the body, which I think psychedelics is very helpful for as well, as kind of getting you out of your head, out of the ego, and more into the body, the heart, the subconscious, the spirit.
Yep. And of course, it depends upon the medicine.
Yes, of course. Yes.
I speak from personal experience. Yes. But yeah, I mean, this is all about altered states of consciousness as the theme here. We exist in let's say the predominant consciousness is also linked to a predominant experience of disembodiment. That's what our dominant culture has instilled in us. This is my belief, and how most of us move through the world really cut off from our bodies. In my work around sex and intimacy, it's one of the most common things that I hear clients talking about. Like, yes, I'm having sex, or I'm in the moment with my partner, but really and truly, I'm not. I'm up in my head. I'm thinking about a million other things, and that's just one example of the ways where, even in moments when we would like to be in our bodies, objectively speaking, for most of us, it's actually a very foreign experience. And as I say that statement, my heart breaks a little, because it is our nature to be in our bodies. You know, this is not something only certain people get to do. This is not something that you need to be special in order to access. This is actually our natural state that we've just gotten very conditioned to be distant from. And so I love that. Sounds like the breath really is a powerful, breath work in particular, a powerful embodiment practice in its way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think part of that altered state and that shift in perspective is kind of getting you underneath the conditioning and all the learning and all of everything that you've picked up from your upbringing and from your parents, and starting to get more to like your truth. And like that can be so informative for people, and so helpful as they're figuring themselves out and deciding who they want to be and how they want to show up in the world. And I always like to share a quote by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he says that a memory without the emotional charge becomes wisdom. And I love that quote, because I feel like breathwork is really helping us find where we are holding on to these emotional charges, helping us breathe them through, so then we can just show up wiser.
Yeah. And does somebody who's coming into a breathwork practice, like, do they need to come in with a really clearly established intention about, here's the thing I want to unwind for myself, here's the healing I want? Or can you really just go on the journey and let the wisdom of the breath guide you?
Yeah, absolutely. Go on the journey. And I always tell people it's wonderful to have an intention, but you can't be attached to it, because we never can predict what's going to come up in breathwork. Obviously, if there's something really present for you, there's a high likelihood that that'll be a part of your journey. But oftentimes people are completely surprised by their experience and what actually comes up into their awareness.
That's great. I'm as someone who likes to be surprised every now and then, like says me. What are some of the other things that if somebody was learning about breathwork newly right now, like, what are some of the things you would want them to know so that they can get oriented to this in a good way?
Yeah, I think it's to really just try to come to it with an open mind and an open heart, because there are a million different possibilities. And from my experience, it's always productive. It's always going to give you something, some type of takeaway, some type of learning. But as long as you are open to what those potential outcomes could be, you're going to get the most out of it. You know, we talked about the variety in experiences, and I really try to emphasize for people, like, those more relaxed, more embodied, more tranquil experiences are just as valuable. Like, they're so wonderful for our nervous system, and they're so wonderful for just our overall state of being, just being able to access that type of peace, that type of calm. But I think it's interesting, it's a beautiful modality on its own, and it's a great complement to other tools that people might be working with. We talked about therapy, we talked about psychedelics, but really any kind of self-work you're doing, I find this is really a wonderful complement and can help integrate those things. Yeah. And I think that I always tell people, at a bare minimum, this is wonderful for stress and anxiety. That's guaranteed. Breathing in this way, especially for this duration, is going to move some stress. That's a very clear energy that most of us are carrying that will alleviate after a breathwork session. So who doesn't want that benefit? And then being open to what other possibilities might be there. Yeah. And it's interesting I have couples come in, I have families come in. I always do advise, if you're with somebody that you're very close to, it's recommended that you don't lay next to each other, because you might be too aware of the other person's experience, and it can interfere with you having your own. Yeah. But people choose whether or not they want to be apart or not. It's always interesting who will take that advice and who's like, no, we're going to hold hands the entire time. I'm like, okay, that's great.
about the way our nervous systems entrain, like harmonize, sync up with one another. And if it's somebody that you are really already deeply familiar with, intimately connected to, that entrainment is so established that you kind of almost can't tease it apart from each other if you're in such an altered state of consciousness. So that makes a lot of sense. And it makes me think about the ways breath shows up in the work that I do around erotic embodiment and intimacy in relationships. I notice one of the things that I'm often helping to educate my clients on is the concept of relaxed arousal as a beautiful way to lead into intimacy. The relaxation first, the coming back to your own home base, if you will, where your nervous system can really be receptive and at ease, and then build the arousal on top of that. I'm curious, if there's anything about relaxation and arousal as there being an order to those things that also shows up in a breathwork journey.
Interesting. Yes, I hadn't really thought about that before, but in a session with me, it's generally about 2 hours. And the first 40-ish minutes, we're doing a little bit of breath together. I'm offering a really thorough introduction because I want people to be able to trust the experience and to relax into it as much as possible. So regardless of wherever they came from, that time I find is pretty important to get people to land and be as receptive as possible. And then I'm guiding them through the breath with music, with support, with instruction. And then we have time to check in afterwards. But I do think there is something about that introduction that does allow people to kind of settle in, trust, remain curious, still have nerves if it's their first time. It's normal to have some nervousness because you don't know what's going to happen. But I try to prepare people as much as possible so that they can get the most out of the experience. And then thinking about what you were sharing, though, I think that's just from personal experience. I've seen breath be a really beautiful, complement and almost gateway to increased intimacy. I think
Absolutely.
Speaking for myself, I've almost had to unlearn breathing so quickly during intimate moments. It feels like, oh yeah, the arousal's high, the passion's high. I should be breathing really hard and fast and trying to be okay, what if I tried just slowing things down? How does that affect the connection that's happening here? How does that affect the pleasure that I am experiencing?
Yeah. And I'm curious what you've noticed. How does it affect it?
And so it's been, I'll be honest, it's really hard. I have to be okay, slow down. It's so ingrained in me to breathe fast as the arousal is building. But I have noticed it to be very positive when I am able to do so, but it feels challenging.
Yeah, that tracks with my lived experience and what I see happen for clients a lot. It's usually either holding the breath or accelerating the breath that are the go-tos. And so the idea of being conscious of a slower, more rhythmic breath is really foreign to most of us. And yet what I see happen all the time is it takes that nexus of arousal that might be very genitally focused, for instance, and allows it to spread more globally throughout the whole body. And so instead of a climax, for instance, being a single peak experience, it becomes waves and ripples that can pulse out through your whole body for a much longer period of time. And that's one of the beautiful things, how I work with breath in the work that I do. And yeah, I love that you've had your own explorations with breath and intimacy as well.
Yeah. It's definitely an area I'd like to study more, but just in my little experiments that I've done myself, it's been beautiful to witness. And I remember even having a moment with a partner where we decided to sync our breaths. And this is before, we weren't having intercourse, but we were in that zone of wanting to get there. And we're oh, let's just try mirroring each other's breaths for a while. And unexpectedly, it became a very emotional experience. My partner started crying in a beautiful way. And he was wow, I did not think that was going to happen. And it brought us closer together.
I mean, sharing breath is such a profoundly intimate thing. And it's also so ordinary, that we don't often pay attention to it. I'm breathing in, you're breathing out. We're always in these cycles, whether we're talking about in our human relationships, in our relationship to the plant kingdom, the exchange of breath is so common. And yet when we're talking about it with a lover, and especially if you're really up close with each other, that is deeply intimate. It is your life force energy flowing back and forth in that shared space. And yeah, I feel like that's something that is a beautiful pathway to a more expanded understanding of what intimacy can be between two people or two or more people. Yeah. Delicious.
It's so simple.
Yes, it is. And I'm a fan of profound simplicity. So
yes, me too. And I think that's why people can become big fans of breath work, is that even though it's a specific process and a specific technique, and it's beautiful to be held in a container, whether that's a private session or a group session, like I find that it's accessible because it's just people using their breath. And a lot of people might come who struggle with meditation, and they feel like they understand the benefits of meditation. They know why they should be doing it, but for whatever reason, they're challenged in creating a consistent practice with it. But with breath work, you can oftentimes achieve somewhat similar benefits, if not identical benefits. And this type of deeper practice you wouldn't do daily. Like, it's not recommended to be done with that frequency, like at most once a week, maybe more if you're in a retreat setting, but it can have just as profound of an impact on your well-being and on your spiritual connection as daily meditation can. And I'm not saying, like, not knocking meditation whatsoever, but sometimes people just have to find what they can commit to.
Yeah. And I feel, as somebody who, my spiritual path began in a very classical yoga lineage, and a seated silent meditation practice was deeply ingrained in that. And what I find is, for most modern humans with the nervous system tone that we've got and the way that our lives are organized, to really be able to cultivate a deep and consistent seated silent meditation practice is asking a lot of most people. So I find I'm like-minded with you on this one, or of a like mind, that things that are a little bit more embodiment based, but still bring us into that presence of mind and get us out from beyond the ego, are just as valuable from the standpoint of the benefits that meditation or mindfulness practice gives us. So I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for all these amazing pearls of wisdom you've been dropping and experiences you're sharing. If somebody wants to get started on this journey, do they need to be in Denver with you, or how do folks find you and get to take these beautiful rides?
So yes, I am based in Denver. I do travel quite a bit. I also offer virtual work, so that's always available. I have quite a few clients who don't have somebody in their area. I'm connected to a pretty significant network, so if you prefer to have somebody in person, and I can try to find somebody that I can refer you to. There is some wisdom to being guided at least the first few times, because the experience can vary so widely. And then, many people ask me, can I do this on my own? Like, absolutely. If you create the container, if you've got good music, if you make sure you're not being interrupted, yes. And like I said, being guided at least the first handful of times can be helpful and allow you to perhaps get more out of the experience than you might on your own. But yes, people can reach out to me in person for private sessions, for group sessions. I offer retreats as well around the world. I'm about to go to Egypt on Sunday, taking 12 women. Very excited about that.
Wow, phenomenal. What an incredible experience that will be. And I will have links to all the ways to connect with you in the show notes here. And I know that you're offering a really generous 15% welcome discount to people for their first time sessions with you. So if you are intrigued in what Claudia is offering, please check her out, love her up, and let us know how your journey went. And if you liked what you heard here today, please give us a little review, share the podcast. We want to get more of this deep deliciousness out into the world. Claudia,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. Any last little parting words for the folks listening? A little deep drop of wisdom?
Yes. And before that, I would just like to say I do offer sliding scale as well. So happy to offer the discount, but I never want finances to be a barrier to this work. So reach out to me. We can always make something work. I want this modality to be available to as many people as possible. That feels really important to me. And I think if nothing else, just bringing a little bit of awareness to your breath can have a huge impact on how you're going about your life and your day. I think as much as you can on a regular basis to be breathing through your nose, to be slowing down your breath, just being intentional about it. We talked about those 6 breaths. Even one beautiful deep breath can start to immediately support how you're feeling and your nervous system. It can help if you're feeling a big emotion. There's even breathwork techniques for if you're feeling tired or you need to help concentrate or you want some clarity. There's so many beautiful techniques available out there, but even just being mindful of your own breath, how you're breathing. Are you holding your breath? Are you breathing through your nose? These little check-ins can make a big difference in how you go about your day.
Love that. Thank you again, Claudia. And let's all take one breath and be well.
Thank you.
Until next time.